What I love about this dish is that when it hits the table, everybody is going to think this was a very difficult dish, but in reality, it is super simple to make. Today, you're gonna learn about Mirepoix, dry aging meat, why you sear your meat in a pan before adding it to a braise, and braising. Buckle up, we're making short ribs. First, we're gonna prep the Holy Trinity. Since this is a French dish, we call it Mirepoix. It's carrots, onions, and celery. Having all of your ingredients prepped and ready to go before you start cooking is one of the most important things you could do in the kitchen. In addition to your Mirepoix, you're gonna have some thyme, rosemary, and bay leaves, also a head of garlic, some black peppercorns, and some beautiful Roma tomatoes. And most importantly, your short ribs. These have been dry brining for 5 days. That might be a little excessive, but here we are. You don't need to be delicate about how you dice up your vegetables for this because this is all gonna go into a braise. And after 3 to 4 hours in the oven, you're not gonna be able to recognize your knife cuts anyway. Next, let's dice up our tomatoes. So we're gonna braise these short ribs, which is a wet cooking technique. The short ribs are gonna braise in some red wine and some stock. And we're gonna add these tomatoes in for some flavor and acidity. And by the time 3 to 4 hours is done, it's all gonna be broken down and the tomatoes are gonna add tons of beautiful flavor. Last but not least, we're gonna cut our garlic in half. So literally cut it right down the center like that. Now that we've got all of our prep work done, we're ready to cook. So first we're gonna brown the meat in this Dutch oven, then it's gonna travel into the oven and cook for 3 to 4 hours. And we use a cast iron pan like this because it's versatile and can do both things. We're gonna first heat up our pan over medium-high heat. Once the pan gets hot, then we add our oil. We're gonna use this algae cooking oil, an incredibly high heat oil. As you'll notice, the short rib looks dried out. Technically, it's been dry brined. I salted it with kosher salt pretty heavily about 5 days ago, and removing all that moisture really helps when you're about to sear it in the pan. And while this is not completely necessary, if you have the time, I recommend giving it a shot. It will take a good dish to a whole nother level. Now we're gonna go in with the short ribs, meat side down first. After that first side's browned, we're gonna turn them over. The goal here is to get browning all over your short ribs because color is flavor. So keep a close eye on them because you want them browned but not burnt. Now that these are finished, we're gonna transfer them to a cooling rack to let them rest while we start prepping the braise. So you want them browned on all sides, just like this. Next, we're gonna reduce the heat down to medium and add in our Mirepoix. First, in with your onions. We're gonna cook our Mirepoix until our onions are translucent and our carrots and celery are a little bit softened. A good stir, we're trying to pick up all the flavor from the pan that we just cooked the short ribs in. So as your Mirepoix cooks, you wanna scrape the bottom of the pan to catch any of the brown bits that have loosened up. A different way to deglaze your pan is to turn it off. Let it sit for 2 minutes, and the onions release a bit of their moisture, allowing you to deglaze the pan without adding any liquid. Now that the pan is deglazed and the onions are translucent, we can add in our garlic and our tomatoes. After the tomatoes have cooked for about 5 to 8 minutes, you'll notice they've started to break down a little bit. Now it's time to add our red wine, our stock, and our aromatics. So we're using wine. It's a great braising liquid. As it reduces down, it's gonna add great flavor and great acidity. And it's gonna help balance out that meaty flavor and fattiness of the short ribs. And yes, we are adding the whole bottle. Now we're going in with our aromatics. First, a bit of thyme, some rosemary, and a couple of bay leaves. Then we're gonna add some black peppercorns. Now we're gonna add our short ribs back in. You wanna nestle them in good. Lastly, we're gonna add in our stock. I like adding my stock last, so you could add just enough in order to submerge your short ribs. And as you can see, this one here is sticking up a little bit, so we're gonna nestle that down to make sure that all the meat is submerged. We're gonna add just a bit of kosher salt, and don't worry about tasting it now. We're gonna finish seasoning it at the end. Now that it's come up to a simmer, we're gonna place the lid on, just slightly cracked open to allow a little bit of airflow and some of the moisture to escape, so it reduces while it's in the oven. So this is gonna cook for 4 hours, and then I'm gonna let it cool completely. And after, I'll put the whole Dutch oven in the fridge overnight. And like magic, it's gonna come out looking like this. The reason we put it into the fridge overnight is to allow the fat to congeal. Now, is this completely essential? No. But by removing the fat, you're gonna create a much better flavor in the end product. First, we're gonna remove the bay leaves and some of the other aromatics just to make it a little bit easier, and you'll see the fat sticks to most of these. Now that we've got some of those aromatics out, it makes it a lot easier to scrape out some of this fat. If you don't have time to cool down your braise, there are some other methods, including the ice cube technique, which we aren't gonna show you today, but you can feel free to look up on Google. Since this has been in the refrigerator overnight, we're gonna get it back on the heat and warm it up a bit. I'm gonna remove my short ribs and put them into the oven separately on a baking sheet. This technique is gonna allow me to get a little bit of crispiness on those short ribs while we warm up this liquid. We're gonna strain it through this sieve. We're gonna discard all these root vegetables here. They've given up all their flavor at this point. And what we're left here is this rich, beautiful braising liquid. And you can see how much it's reduced down. We put in a bottle of wine and 2 cups of stock. I like to use a spoon to push all the liquid out of these vegetables. So now we're gonna take a saucepan and pour our braising liquid back in there for it to reduce. It's gonna be really good. It's reduced by about 50%. And this is why we use a nice wide, in this case, a saucier or saucepan, because it allows more surface area to be exposed, thus allowing it to reduce faster. Now that the sauce has reduced about 80%, you'll see the texture has completely changed and it's nice and thick and syrupy, and we're ready to knock in some butter. So our ribs were dry brined, browned, braised for 4 hours. Then we took the braising liquid, strained it, and reduced it about 80%. Now we're gonna plate this thing because it's almost time for dinner. Start with some polenta. We're gonna take our short ribs, plate it right here in the center. Now it's time to plate our sauce. Lastly, hit it with a little chopped parsley, and we're done. And then all it's left to do is just take a bite. That is so good. Wow. Reducing that wine has given us such a beautiful flavor. A little bit sweet, a little bit acidic. The sauce is velvety and smooth. It's perfect. I hope you try and make this at home.